Welcome everybody here to Sports Huddle. We're 24/7. We're always talking about sports. I'm the host here. I'm Kevin Bradley, the coach around here in the area, and I'm very fortunate today. I got two of the best runners in the Merrimack Valley area. Havel bred, Lawrence bred, Methuen bred. They're all around the streets. You see them running around the beach area. Hey, you'll see them out in the streets. If you're driving enough, you're going to see them running. It doesn't make a difference what type of weather they're in, rain, snow, or 90 degrees temperature, they're out there running. I'm very fortunate, two of the finest runners, Boston Marathon runners also, and also college and Olympic type of runners too in the Olympic trials. And right here to my guest today, we have Charley Nassar, and we also have Paul McGovern. And I want to thank you both for coming on Sports Huddle here, where everybody's talking about sports. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us, Kevin.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be having you guys here because not too often that the show brings the top people, sport athletes here, and we got two of the top right here.
I have to say I'm Lynn bred, but happy to be in the Merrimack Valley. Yeah.
You drive around Lynn, you'll even see him there too. Yeah. I told you. I've driven around in snowstorms, blizzards. They told everybody, get the cars off the road, and these two are out there running in the streets. I want to thank you, and let's talk about. I know you've done a lot of accomplishments in your running careers here. You both ran the Boston Marathon multiple times. You did ultra marathons. You did short ones, long ones. Doesn't make a difference. We're going to talk about all that, but let's just talk about running. How did you get started in running?
Sure. I'll start. My running career began when my wife was starting to have our children. And she told me, okay, enough of taking all that time doing basketball, which I had been doing. And so I needed a sport to keep me in shape. And running was very, very convenient to do so. So I strapped on the sneakers and started running with a person at work who was running his very first Boston Marathon. He asked me to join him for the last month of training. And I started to run at lunch with him a few miles. And after about 3 weeks, we were about 1 week away from the Boston Marathon, 1994 Boston Marathon. And he said, hey, would you be willing to run the 94 Boston Marathon with me? And I said, that's 26 miles, right? And he said, yeah, sure is. I said, I've been running 3 weeks. My longest run is 5.5 miles. I'm not sure that's a wise move. He said, I'm sure you can do it. And somehow I was delusional enough to think I could do it. And sure enough, that's what I did. And that started my running. I loved doing the 94 Boston Marathon when I finished. It was great, and I've been running ever since. So
wow.
It's been fantastic.
So that's what it took your wife to have a baby and said, get out of the house. Well, you were trying to get out of the house.
Don't spend quite as much time with all the guys playing ball. Spend what she thought was going to be less time running. Little did she know I was going to get so into running and spend all the time I have spent on it. So it probably hasn't saved a lot of time running over basketball, but it's been great for me.
Well, Charley, he talks about out there running, and he converted. Charley was also one of the top basketball players. You've seen him at Cedardale. Many of you see looking at him now, you say, I know that man. Well, he's spent many hours at Cedardale playing basketball, and I know he was on many machines running all the time. In fact, he goes out running in the streets, and then I see him at Latitudes or Cedardale, still puts in on the Stairmaster or something. He'll put another hour after he's done and stretching out. Well, thank you, Charley. How about Paul? Paul, what took you
For me, back at my Lynn English High days, my dad suggested I get in shape for baseball. I was always a pitcher, and cross-country season was in the fall, and so I asked the coach, do you think I could run with the team to get my legs in shape for spring? He said, sure, we have a race tomorrow. I'll put you in the JV race. Wow. So off I went to Lynn Woods in my basketball sneakers. The JV race, the gun went off, and not knowing how to pace myself, I did a series of sprints, wait for the other guys, and got back on the main road, and the varsity guy said, straight ahead, and I ended up winning the JV race. And next week, they bumped me to varsity, and I tied for first with teammates. So I had a predisposition with my thin build to be able to run, and I was fortunate enough to play baseball and run through college. So running was a joy, and it got me in shape and kept my legs in good order for baseball.
Well, get you out there running out in the streets, a lot of thinking, a lot of time you get to think, and I know I've seen you guys, you don't really have headphones on, so I know you're not listening to any music, so it's either you're talking to yourself or I see you talking to, you're out there with a group and just talking. What are you talking about mostly that goes out there?
Well, whatever the moment brings. So one of the misconceptions about running is that it's a very solitary event. And it can be solitary if you wish for it to be so. If you go out by yourself, of course, it could very much be a solitary event. However, when you run with other runners, it's a very social aspect to running that we really enjoy. And so we talk about our lives, we talk about the things affecting ourselves, our families, our jobs. It could be even current events, although I think it's much more personal oftentimes of things we share. Paul and I talk about our children, their lives going through school, all those kind of aspects. So very, very social aspect to running, and very much a running camaraderie that happens when you join a particular group for quite some time. So it's been really, really a fun aspect to running that I did not anticipate when I first got into it.
You talk about it. Paul, you were a pitcher. And correct me, is it Fitchburg or Framingham State?
Fitchburg State.
And also you had a tryout down in Florida.
Yes.
With the Pirates, am I correct?
Expos.
The Expos.
Yeah, the old Expos.
Montreal Expos.
So once I exhausted all my baseball career and didn't make it any further, I focused more on my running and was able to achieve some goals that I had set for myself as the years went on. I knew it was a sport that I was very comfortable with, and I could handle the training. And eventually I got training, my training was up over 100 miles a week. Wow. And I got a taste of the Boston Marathon out of college, and was fortunate. I paced myself well and ended up 22nd, and my time was 2:22. And knowing that, at that point, my coach felt it was reasonable to go for the Olympic trials. So in 1992, I qualified for the Olympic trials running under 2:20, 2:19, and that was
at the Olympic Training Center?
It was held that year in Columbus, Ohio. So the top 3 make the Olympic team, and there were 105 of us that qualified. I was seeded number 82nd going in time-wise, but I ended up 16th. Wow. It was a warm day, and I loved the heat at the time. So it worked out well for me. But running, like Charlie said, there's a great camaraderie amongst the runners. A lot of people think, how can you chat out there? But when you're in good shape and running with like abilities, you have some great conversations out there, anything under the sun. And then those moments that I train by myself, it's a great stress reliever. You can go out and run mile after mile, and before you realize it, you've covered 15, 16 miles, and it passes by so quick.
Wow. 15, 16 miles, quick.
Yeah.
I don't know. You guys putting in 100 miles a week. I'm lucky I even drive 100 miles a week in a car. But, you're Framingham, Fitchburg State.
Yeah.
And Charley, Cornell University.
But not as a runner.
Not as a runner?
As a student.
As a student. Engineer.
Engineer,
And,
yeah.
well, that's good. So, you're out there talking to each other. I know, Paul, we'll start with you. You have a daughter and a son that are runners, top runners in the area. They're at Phillips Academy.
Yes, one thing with running, it's a very tough sport on the body, so I never really encourage the kids to run. I'd rather have them fall into it as time goes on. And sure enough, eventually, after their soccer careers and baseball and softball were exhausted, they both kind of gravitated towards running, and I'm happy to say they're enjoying it. And my son will be running at Dickinson College in the fall.
Dickinson, right here, yeah.
D3 down in Pennsylvania.
And he's one of the top runners around in the area.
He does well in the distances. I think college will suit him better because he's probably more like I am. The longer, the better. My daughter's more a middle distance, miler, half miler. So high school distances suit her well right now. But I'm glad they both enjoy it. Mm-hmm. And hopefully they'll enjoy it for a lifetime as I have. I've been running now 35 plus years. I've got over 100,000 miles on my body.
Wow.
And fortunate, I was only injured once every 10 years. So wow. Thankfully my knees have held out. I had a streak not too long ago. I had over 11 years without missing a day.
Without missing a day. And the minimum miles you put in, I remember you told me you had to get a mile a day?
You can make your own rules. So my minimum was 1 mile. And I'd cover anywhere from 1 mile to a marathon during that time.
And you get out there 11 years,
Yeah.
getting them 1 mile a day.
And I always tell the kids, who says you can't make money running? Because I was fortunate during a time we did a fundraiser. We got to run from San Francisco to Fenway Park, and we raised over $300,000 for 5 youth charities. Friends and I, we did a relay. So we made some money.
From San Francisco to Fenway. That's
And we
pretty
threw out
good.
the first pitch with Giselle.
Oh,
Yeah, so
that's pretty
that
good.
was well worth the run to Fenway.
That's worth the run, huh? Jeez.
Yeah.
And Charlie, you have a daughter that's over at Phillips Academy.
I do.
She's not a runner, but she's one of the top softball pitchers in the area, and she's going to be on her way too.
She's going to MIT. She'll be playing for MIT and hopefully doing some studying at MIT. Otherwise,
she better
won't be at MIT very long. But yes, she does do a little bit of running to actually stay in shape for softball, but it's a very casual running at this point. Although she has expressed interest in maybe getting a little more serious with the running once her softball career ends, and has even expressed interest in running the Boston Marathon with me, which I would love to have happen. Two things have to happen. One, she does have to follow through with that wish and do some training and get herself in shape. And two, I have to still be running at that point, which I'm not sure which will be the more difficult task, but I certainly hope that happens, and that'd be a wonderful time for both of us.
That would be awesome, the
It
family
would be
out there
great.
running the Boston Marathon together.
It would be great, absolutely.
And the Boston Marathon is the granddaddy of them all. I work with elderly patients doing physical therapy.
Yep.
And one of my coworkers will say, oh, this is Paul. He ran in the Olympic trials marathon. And then inevitably the patient will say, but have you ever done Boston? And forget the Olympic trials. Yep. Boston is the marathon. And anything can happen in the Boston Marathon. The layout of the course and all, it can be tough on the body one day, and the next year you breeze through it. Well, I won't say breeze through it,
but that's right. It's a very challenging course. People don't realize that sometimes when they talk about the Boston Marathon. They do hear about the Heartbreak Hill and the hills. What is the most challenging aspect of the course, though, is the downhills. It's a net downhill course, 173 feet to be exact. And so the downhill nature of running pounds on your legs. So your body is almost stopping itself every step as you're going downhill. And that does a job on the muscles, and you're repeating that process over many, many miles. It takes a toll on your legs, takes a lot out of them. So that nature of the Boston Marathon course makes it difficult. And then combining that with the uncertainty of weather. I've run in a nor'easter. I've run Boston in 90-degree heat and humidity. Very, very challenging aspect to it. But
and this past marathon, you ran the last marathon, it was cold out there.
Cold, rainy, windy, headwind the whole way. So you just don't know what you're going to get April in Boston. But
now on something like that, the headwind and the rain, do you wear just a normal t-shirt running? Or?
Well, everyone has their needs. So I was running a more relaxed marathon pace-wise for me. So I decided that it was more important that I stayed warmer, since I wasn't going to be pushing the pace and letting my own body heat generate as much as it normally would. So I actually wore a very light jacket over a running shirt and shorts, and that was sufficient for me. Although when you stop at the end of the marathon, that's when it gets most cold, because your body has utilized a lot of its energy source. It's kind of out of energy, and then the chill of that air coming off of the water in Boston hits you, and it gets very, very cool.
Now, as you're crossing that finish line, are you into the tent they have there, the Red Cross?
They don't give you a tent. No, well, you hope not to end up in the tent, although I
didn't know everybody went in
have
there. They give you
ended
that
up in the
silver,
tent.
silver foil.
Yeah, they give you the foil, and but the foil's a little overrated, I will tell you. It helps a little, but it's not keeping you warm. It keeps a little of the wind broken from hitting you. But yeah, and the people who having some medical issues do in fact find their way to the medical tent at the end, and there's tremendous resources supporting the Boston Marathon. That's what's so great about it. A lot of volunteers doing that behind the scenes work to make sure that the runners are enjoying their day and are safe out there on the course. So it's a pretty fantastic race. And as Paul had his 11-year running streak, the one item that I've been pretty proud of, my streak, is I've run the last 22 Boston Marathons. I've been fortunate enough to be healthy to make the starting line,
22,
each and every one of them. So
and completed 22?
I have
22
completed,
for 22?
22 for 22, yes, 22 for 22.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been
That
great.
really is.
Yes. Two of them as bandits, which Bandit, for those who don't realize, is an unofficial runner where you kind of jump in the back and you still run the same course on the same day as everyone else,
Yeah.
but
No number.
No number. So my very first marathon, I did not have the opportunity to qualify for Boston. It has pretty stringent qualifying requirements. I didn't get into running in enough time, since I had only been running 3 or 4 weeks before I decided to run the first Boston. So that was as a bandit, another as a bandit. But otherwise, I've been fortunate enough, like I said, to qualify and run the Boston Marathon the last 22 years. So
That's
it's been
great.
great.
22 years. That's
Yeah, it's
both
been
of you
great.
have a streak, 11 straight
Wow.
years of just with running at least a mile a day.
Well, yeah,
and 22.
that had ended with a knee problem, but that streak's incredible to me. My streak for the Boston Marathon is 7 for 7. I ended up in the medical tent. Anywhere from IVs to hypothermia. I don't know how to pace myself as well as Charley, and I have a range where I've done 2:22 for my fast side, but I've run over 5 hours also. And no matter how well you prepare, you just never know what you're going to get on that day and how your body's going to respond. And key to, like Charley mentioning the net downhill, you have to really be careful that you don't go out too fast, because the problems will magnify over the course of 26.2. And most times when I've done the Boston Marathon, for 2 weeks after, my patients walk better than I do. And they're saying, what kind of therapist is he? I'm supposed to get up and walk, and he can't even walk.
He can't walk, yeah.
All right. I'd have to walk backwards to get down a flight of stairs for about a week after.
Wow.
The thighs hurt so much
Yeah.
from the downhill. So
It's
very
everything. The
humbling.
Boston Marathon is everything everybody talks about. You always hear about it, the TV reporters, everybody talking about it. It's the granddaddy of them all. They said
Yes.
like the Rose Bowl is in the football, the Super Bowl, the Boston Marathon is what it is for runners.
And even to a lot of the Kenyan runners, the Boston is more recognizable to them and more prestigious than the Olympics themselves. To win at Boston means a big payday and just world recognition because of the race. It's incredible.
Well, that's
and
what-
it's right in our backyard.
Yeah, right there. I've had an opportunity to go run. I mean, I've saw Charley able to run. I have a spot, and I don't know the exact spot. It's at the fire
at the
station,
fire station.
about middle
Yeah.
of the way.
About 17 and a
right
half
before
miles
Heartbreak
in.
Hill.
Right before the series of hills that culminate in Heartbreak Hill. That's
Yeah.
right. I've seen you many a
Seen
time,
there.
as you know.
I'm always here cheering them on.
High five and having a great time.
I
out
remember my
there.
sons. I brought them here, and they said, "You ever going to run this?" No, I don't think so. I'm not made to run that. But also, you talk about you're a legend in the marathon. Did you have a certain time on the marathon?
Well,
And the people were talking about you. I hear that story. They say on the subway, right, Charley?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you should tell that story.
Tell the story.
Well, just before I got married, I wanted to have one last hurrah at the marathon. So the 100th running of the marathon was in 1996. And right here in Haverhill, we took the train, my wife-to-be. 1 month later, we got married in May. And we got on the train. There was a bunch of runners, and I recognized that they were from another country. And I said, oh, look at all those skinny-looking humans. They've got to be here for the marathon. And sure enough, as we went along, my wife-to-be mentioned something about running, and they said they were there for the marathon, and they were from Macau. At the time, it was a Portuguese territory. It became a part of China later, but they said, have you done the marathon? And I said, I did. And they said, well, how'd you finish? I said, well, 10 years ago I ran, and I did 2:22 for 22nd place. And the next minute they spoke in a different tongue, and they all got up out of the chair and they were bowing to me, and my wife-to-be, Bev, said, what is going on here? So the whole rest of the ride from Haverhill into Boston, they were just asking questions about the marathon. The respect they gave me because of my finishing place and time was great. And then frosting on the cake, when I did the marathon, I ended up achieving my goal. I wanted to come in the top 100 for the 100th, and I ended up 82nd. And my time, I wanted to break 2:30, and I was 2:29, and ended up first Massachusetts finisher.
First Massachusetts finish. Wow.
For that race. And there were 40,000 runners, and 1 month later I got married and my running went down the tube. That was it. My career was over. Had to do housework.
We'll maybe cut that one out. Mo. We'll cut that part out. Well, that's good. 22nd place. That's
Yeah.
incredible. 40,000 people that are out there running all the time and say you're
Yeah,
up there.
yeah, 22nd and 86th, the 90th, and then 84th or 82nd 10 years later. So that was a good stretch for me.
Did somebody have to push you into the marathon, say, go ahead, run it?
No, I knew once I, exhausted my baseball ambitions, the marathon was always in the back of my head. And so I was fortunate enough to stay healthy. That's the name of the game in running. And again, the marathon's right here in our backyard. And
Yeah.
training through the winter is brutal, but you get it done, you survive, and you've seen the marathon. They come in all different shapes and sizes.
They
So
sure do.
if your listeners out there think that they'd want to do it someday, don't be intimidated and think you have to look like a Kenyan runner or like Charley. You can come any size or shape. Coaching the Merrimack Valley Striders for that 100th running, we had a lot of athletes that wanted to do it, and some had never run a step in their life.
Wow.
And they had 3 months with us of training, walk, jog, and they built up, and we had a 100% finish rate.
In 3 months, you had them ready for the Boston
Yeah, they
Marathon.
all finished, and there was over 80 of them. So that was a great accomplishment as a coach to get those people to finish.
That's pretty good. I know you, Charlie, you do a lot of running the Boston Marathon. People come to you and you help them through their first Boston Marathon. You're like the coach on the course.
Right.
Paul, you did it off the roads, and Charlie, you're the one, you take them step by step on their way through.
Yes, because I have a little different perspective than Paul. I don't have the talent level that Paul has. I am not capable of running 22nd into the Boston Marathon 2:22. I'm more of a mid-pack to back of the pack type of runner.
Yeah.
And so maybe the common man can associate a little bit more with that. And I love the Boston Marathon, and so when I talk to people about that, I tell them that if I can run it, anyone can run it, which is true. I'm actually very heavy for a marathoner. I'm over 200 pounds, and most marathoners are the skinny people like Paul has mentioned, like himself. So,
And what's the height for most of the marathon runners?
Pretty short. Certainly not. I'm 6'6".
Yeah, you're 6'6", and that's why I want to
tower over the
So about
typical
5'7"
marathoner.
to 5'11"?
Yeah, well, even shorter than that. I'd say
Shorter?
that the top runners are more like the 5'6", 5'7", 5'8" range. They weigh anywhere from 120 to 135 pounds. And
What about the women? How tall?
women are very short. So most of the top women are closer to 5 feet, just over 5 feet, 5'2" even, and extremely light, 100 pound, 110 pounds at most. So
They say most of the elites are 2 pounds per inch of height.
Yeah.
So if you're 70 inches, 140 pounds should be your weight if you're going to be one of the top tiered runners. So even at my height and weight, I was a little overweight at the Olympic trials.
And what
When
was
you
your
look
weight
at the
then,
oth-
when you were
I
in
was
the-
152, 153. And there were, out of the 105 of us, there were only 3 of us that weighed over 150.
Wow.
if I weighed 150,
I lost that
I'd
in
be-
fourth grade, I think. My marathon days were over in the fourth grade. Wow.
But yeah, to get back
Yeah,
to
go
the
ahead,
point,
you were
Kevin,
talking
that because I talk to people about the Boston Marathon and really enjoy it, and I enjoy running it with new people. There's something very special about your very first marathon, and particularly your first Boston Marathon. And what happens is if I am able to help train someone through those tough winter months and get them to the starting line of Boston, I'd love to experience that first Boston Marathon with them. And so I've done quite a few of the races running with people in their first Boston, and I relived that wonder and joy of that first Boston that, now after having done a number of them, that you lose a little bit, but you can relive it through them as you're going step by step through the marathon, because there are a number of distinguishing features of Boston. You hear about, people hear about, the Wellesley girls at Wellesley College and all the screaming they do, and the fire station, and running down
Boston
Boylston
College.
Street, and Boston
Yeah.
College, which is great, into Cleveland Circle, and and down Com Ave, and Boylston Street, which is by far the best finish in marathoning that I've seen.
Is that where, right, you turn Boylston Street?
Right, you turn onto Boylston Street and you head
That's
down,
when
and you can see it's about 4/10 of a mile, and all you have is people lining both sides, screaming. You see the finishing banner in front of you. It's a very, very exciting.
Now, people talk about it that people are screaming for the runners, not just the top runners, but they say they're all screaming, even the middle of the pack and the back of the pack, they just don't stop.
That's what's best about Boston. That's what I think is the distinguishing feature. The fans are multi-layered deep, and they scream all day long. Sometimes by the time I get there, I'm running that 4 or 5 hour marathon potentially, and people have been out there for 5, 6 hours. And especially on a day like this past year where it was cold, wet, and windy, but people were still out there, you know, cheering us on and inspiring us. And that really helps. And that's unlike any other marathon. I've done New York and Marine Corps and Chicago and other big marathons. And there are a lot of people out there, but by and large, they're cheering for a particular person, maybe their friend, their brother, or whatever it might be, whereas Boston's cheering for everyone. So it's great.
No, that's good. And I know we're starting to wrap up. We can talk about this forever. I'm very fortunate. I may not be able to run the marathon, but I can talk about it. And but other marathons that you guys run, you talked about the Marine, the Ultra one. When you haven't had enough, when 26 miles just isn't enough to run, there's another one, and that's the Ultra Marathon. You ran a 50-mile race, and you have a Trek USA. That's even another marathon.
This was the a relay that we did from San Fran to Fenway with Dave McGovern, the director of the Boston Marathon. He had run across the country 25 years previous to this. This was in 2004. He ran 45 miles a day for 80 straight days. So he wanted to relive that, but knew he couldn't do it on his own, so we had a team of 10 guys, and we planned this for 2.5 years, and we did fundraising, and 5 youth charities were the recipient of our hard work, and we had to each run 15 to 18 miles a day for 25 straight days. A great way to see the country, and memorable. We were fortunate. We passed through Fort Collins one day with beautiful weather like it is today, and the next day they got a foot of snow. And then we made it through Nebraska with rainy weather, but we heard like a day or two later, tornadoes had passed through some of the spots we went through. So Mother Nature cooperated with us. We had a great time. My kids were very young. They got to see us finish in Fenway Park. That's great. Before a Red Sox game, and the Giants sent us off before a Giants-Marlins game. So it was a great experience.
Okay, and Charlie, before we wrap it up, your ultra marathon, 15 miles.
50
you were
miles.
talking about me eating potatoes on the run. And
Oh yeah, so that's the great thing about running 50 miles. It's all through the woods, up and down mountains, streams, the whole day. You eat all along to keep your energy level up. So you're eating salted potatoes, so you have electrolytes. You're eating peanut butter and jelly to get protein, fat, and carbohydrates in your body. It's a fantastic time, very social. It's great. So that's what I really love to do is go run those, spend all day in the woods running around. It's just a great time.
Oh,
Coach Kevin might be enticed by this. He hears
Absolutely.
eating.
I brought my sweats, guys. I thought maybe we go run a quick 22 miles. That's nothing for you. That's just like a warm-up when I hear about 26 miles isn't enough. I'm going to run 50, or I'm going to run 3,000 miles across the country. I said, well, maybe with 22 miles. I brought my sweats, and maybe we'd have some fun out in the back here. We'll go for a run. But, you know, I want to thank all of you. I had Charley Nassar and Paul McGovern, two of the finest runners in the area and in their time, but yet they're still doing it. It goes to show you, you can run forever as long as you can walk. You can always do something out there on the course. Boston Marathon, and who knows what they're going to run next. But we want to thank you very much for coming on Sports Huddle. And I want to thank you very much. And for you people, you want to be on the show, Sports Huddle. We're 24/7, as they say on some stations. If they're talking about it, we're talking about it. If they're already talking about it, we've talked about it. So if you want to be here in this chair and want to be on, you can email me at any time at sportshuddle247@gmail.com, and we'll bring you right here, and we'll talk about any sport that it may be. I want to thank you, and thank you guys very much for having you on the show.
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and thank for everybody in the producing studio.
Okay.